Michigan Ghoul calling. Michigan Ghoul calling. This is Michigan Ghoul, the most hated, slandered, maligned, and ignored person within the satanic community, speaking to you this evening. In this broadcast, I'd like to speak to some of the allegations that have been made against me over the years. Some of these allegations have some truth to them. Others are partly true, based in truth, and some are flat out outlandish, and I just like to deal with those and let the listeners know what the facts are from my point of view and have you judge it appropriately for yourselves. The main allegation that's been thrown out at me on boards such as Satanic International Network, My Satan, and a couple of other places is that, in their words, that I am some sort of quote-unquote pedophile, and they've, referred to me as Michigan Pedo and different cute little nicknames like that. I want to point out the source of where that's coming from, and again, let you judge for yourself what you think from this point on. Back around 1997, I wrote an article for the zine I was publishing at that time called The Necroerotic. It was titled A Necrophilic Solution to a Moral Dilemma in Society, and what it suggested was the use of the corpses of young people, children, and so forth who have died to be used by people who were attracted to young children as opposed to said people harming or otherwise molesting younger children. Well, this article, needless to say, drew a lot of criticism in its time and still does to this day. Well, when I was still a poster as of 2011 on the Satanic International Network, the topic of either sex offenders or pedophiles or whatever was the particular heading came up, and I foolishly, in retrospect, threw my hat into the ring, and rather than jump in on the whole castrate them with a rusty body knife, them pedophiles, they don't deserve no better, instead of jumping in on that redneck type of mentality, I actually was again foolish enough to suggest a more rational approach in dealing with it by questioning some of the guidelines of various age of consent laws, questioning the wisdom of some of the overbearance of the child pornography laws and so forth. Well, some people took this way out of context and said that just because I was questioning age of consent, child porn, etc. laws, that somehow that made me a pedophile, quote unquote. Now, that's a bit like looking at someone who's questioning mandatory minimum sentences for pot smoking, for example, and calling that person a junkie or a druggie or a stoner and so forth, just because a person questions the particular application of a law or the overbearing hysteria surrounding something like pedophilia, doesn't make them, in my mind, and I don't think in any rational person's mind, to be quote-unquote a pedophile or child molester or anything of this sort. But apparently the leader of the SIN, Satanic International Network, one Zach Black, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with, didn't stop to consider those facts, and also the fact that I never posted the article about the dilemma in society on his board. It was posted by someone else without my permission and without his knowledge, and posted on his board. So he did what he felt he had to do and banned me from that group, and also from the My Satan space when he took over some sort of interest in that, and most recently from the 600 Club, which he also apparently has gobbled up as some type of oligarch among the satanic community. When you think about that, that's sort of the equivalent of suing Larry Flint because someone on the street gave your child a copy of Hustler magazine. It doesn't really make any sense when you think about it to ban me for quote-unquote posting this on my website when I never posted it to begin with. But anyway, that gives you some ideas to the mentality of the man who calls himself Zach Black. Now, as anyone who's ever run even the smallest type of website knows, I'm sure, it's not cheap running a website, even if it's just a simple blog that you have to pay for with video and chat features and so forth. I've done it myself, I know, and it's not necessarily an easy burden on a working person. Now, from the looks of things here, Zach is controlling at least two sizable websites, namely the Satanic International Network and the 600 Club. These sites, keep in mind, include radio shows, video chat, forums, large bandwidth, and so forth. Now, when I ran the old necroerotic site, that was many years ago, but that was just a simple blog, basically, with no video features, no games, nothing like that on it. And for what it was worth, that one kept going over, or at least nearly dangerously close to its bandwidth limit. And after a while, it was hard to keep that up. So makes one wonder, where does the money come from for these free sites that Zach runs? Is it just little people sending in $5 and $10 donations? Well, that's possible, but I highly doubt that most of us listening to this right now would be able to afford even one of those sites, let alone two. And when we look at Zach, I mean, I know they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but come on, let's face it. We know the guy doesn't exactly look like a neurosurgeon or a rocket scientist, so I doubt his income is paying for this. It makes me wonder if perhaps, and again, this is only speculation, semi-educated guess maybe, but perhaps the money is coming from somewhere else. Now, anyone that's ever read up on politics and the history of COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program run by the feds against disparate groups like the Ku Klux Klan, Civil Rights Movement, Black Panthers, you name it, false fronts are paid for by the enemy to create black propaganda and to create dissension among the ranks of those considered to be subversive fifth column types by the powers that be. Now, coincidentally with what I just said, or maybe not so coincidentally, there's another point to consider. The televangelist mega church movements are making a comeback these days, and they're actually raking in some record-breaking profits. For instance, it's estimated that Joel Osteen's home is worth over $10 million. Of course, Jerry Falwell's long dead, but there are others that are stepping in and fulfilling this and basically milking the people of their profits. Now, getting back to the false flag, enemy-financed groups created by the enemy to stir dissent, one of the characteristics is, again, that they love to stir up trouble and create division among people within a given political or social-based group. Now, anyone who's followed Zach's sites on Sin or 600 Club, either or, notices a lot of backstabbing on his part against people such as Venus Satanas, myself, of course, Blackwood, let's see, who else? Joy of Satan, certainly he slammed them enough. And even to some extent, although to a more mild extent, the Church of Satan itself. I have to wonder, when we put these facts together of these two large boards with money coming from Christ knows where, and the dissension and the back-talking and the backstabbing that goes on these boards. There's no proof, no smoking gun, but it does, at least to me, leave some doors open and some unanswered questions as to who or what may be behind Zach Black and what his true motivations may be. And another point to bring up is that Zach likes to bill his sites as premier Satanist, whatever, communities for everyone. Well, of course, not counting all the people that get kicked out. For example, on the 600 Club, for those of you that haven't seen it, there's actually a section called their Hall of Shame in which they openly boast of all the people that they boot out for every little reason other than alleged flaming, spamming, to not being able to speak English well enough, and so forth. And they even admit that that's only a portion of their list. So that should tell you something right there. I've never heard of a site that has to actually have an entire section devoted to bragging about the people it has kicked out. That doesn't somehow seem like a very legitimate way for a site to do business. But anyway, back to the point that if you look at the content of the sites such as the 600 Club and the Satanic International Network, it's easy to see where a lot of people would be attracted to the site in a superficial way because, of course, you have the social networking aspect, and, of course, hope springs eternal for us males. We might find a female on there for us and so forth, and I suppose there's a few gals on there that feel they might find good men that think as they do as well. But in general, when you read into it, you don't see much of any substance in the way of occult, satanic, left-hand path thought. You see more a lot of this, LOL, and, let's get together and let's listen to some music and that kind of thing. But you don't see much mention in the way of for example, a traditional black mass, or even the statements of Anton LaVey. You don't see the Missa Solemnis mentioned, or comparative religions such as Paleo, Mayombe, Santeria, anything like that. You don't see tarot readings, rune readings, scrying, Ouija board items, nothing like that, really. You don't see anything mentioned about bones in use in rituals. In fact, oftentimes, such items are ridiculed by the admittedly atheist staff of the sites, as well as the same people and condescending to people that consider themselves to be theistic Satanists. On the subject of sexual phobias and philias, there was a study done back in the late 90s by a U.S. psychologist named Professor Adams. He worked for the University of Georgia. And what he found was that 80% of men who expressed belligerent homophobic tendencies actually had secret homosexual feelings. This was done by testing the response that the subject would give to homosexual pornography. Now, if we think about that, 80% of men that run their mouth about fags, queers, so-called, are actually homosexuals. Well, now what does that say about guys who run their mouth about so-called pedophiles, child molesters, and short eyes? Food for thought, folks. This is Michigan Ghoul, signing off.
Diabolus vobiscum.